Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Alicia carefully examined the woman's face on the laptop screen. It turned out that the search engine accidentally displayed an article about this Catalina, the founder of a charitable foundation that helps children in difficult situations, those who have lost their parents or come from very poor families. A well-groomed adult woman with a kind gaze and an open smile. So stylish and energetic. Alicia couldn't take her eyes off her face. She kept scrutinizing, trying to remember, was it her or not? It seemed like it was her after all. There was no complete certainty, as Alicia had only seen her once in her life almost 15 years ago. But still, some internal feeling told her, this is the woman who played such a significant role in the fate of their family. What would have happened to all of them if it weren't for Catalina? Or maybe it's not her after all. Alicia once again skimmed through the article. It told the story of Catalina's life. Now she was quite happy, having finally found her true calling. The woman helps children and considers it her life's mission. Catalina even took 3 little ones from the orphanage under her care, the ones everyone else refused to adopt. They had health and behavioral issues, but now they were thriving teenagers, 2 girls and a boy. They posed for photos with their adoptive mother, beautiful, dressed up, and smiling. Yet, just 10 years ago, no one gave them a chance. Catalina proved by her example that the impossible is possible. The key is love, faith in children, and readiness for long and hard work. Of course, not everyone is capable of such a thing. Catalina is wealthy. Her husband is a prominent businessman, the owner of a well-known chain of gas stations. And she herself achieved a lot for many years. She worked as a stockbroker and managed to accumulate a fortune. In interviews, Catalina admitted that she used to consider her career the main focus of her life, and money was not even the primary motivator. Catalina grew up in a fairly affluent family and never knew need. Work just fascinated her, completely consumed her, and inspired her. It was like an interesting game she fully devoted herself to. But then everything changed. Catalina was around 40 at that time. She started thinking about having children. That's when it turned out that it wasn't so simple. Alicia read this article on the internet like an engaging book, holding her breath. Everything seemed to indicate that the guardian angel and savior of their family was none other than Catalina. Everything fit with astonishing accuracy. Alicia pulled away from the screen, leaned back on the back of the chair, and let out a heavy sigh. Memories. Slow waves of heavy memories washed over her. She was on the brink of despair back then. Alicia couldn't cope with the difficulties that had fallen on her. It seemed that there was nothing good waiting for her ahead. It was a pitch-black abyss, poverty, and survival. Alicia, still very young and inexperienced, didn't want to wake up in the mornings because what good could the next day bring her? It was a terrible state. She had never experienced anything like it before or after. Life had never been kind to Alicia. She was born into a very poor family. Her mother worked as a cleaner, and her father did odd jobs wherever he could. Both of them were uneducated, only finishing school and not pursuing further education. They met somehow and started living together. As far as Alicia knew, her parents were never officially married. The 3 of them lived in a small apartment in a wooden, old building on the outskirts of the city, which used to be a barracks. The family struggled to make ends meet. If one of the spouses managed to earn a little extra money, they would celebrate with drinking, merry neighbors, dancing, and conversations until dawn, sometimes leading to fights. On such occasions, Alicia was treated to cheap sweets from the nearest store, stale gingerbread cookies, chocolate bars with nuts, and soda in tin cans. The little girl felt almost happy. But the truth was, fear always followed. Drunken guests of her parents, many of whom instilled fear in Alicia. Sometimes she couldn't sleep at night, listening to the sounds in the kitchen. For a while, the girl believed that everyone lived the same way as she did. Alicia didn't go to kindergarten. From an early age, she stayed at home alone while her parents worked or hung out somewhere. She liked it that way. She could play wherever she wanted and make as much noise as she pleased. No one scolded or calmed her down. In the yard, Alicia had many friends. She knew them since birth. They were the children of those very neighbors who were so closely associated with her parents. These boys and girls were growing up just like Alicia herself. The area was like that, disadvantaged. Everyone lived like that. But then came the time to go to school, and it was there that Alicia realized how different her life was from that of many other children. Her classmates had beautiful, new school bags and clean clothes. They brought in beautiful toys to school, discussed computer games, and talked about trips to the seaside. Alicia. She felt like she was in a completely different world. At first, the children tried to keep their distance from Alicia. An untidy girl in a faded dress with a patched-up backpack on her shoulders, handed down to her from someone among the neighbors, she stood out from the crowd. Little Alicia was very different from the rest. And she, too, didn't rush to bond with classmates who seemed like aliens to her. But Alicia closely observed these girls and boys. She understood a lot about their lives by looking at them and tried very hard to fit into this foreign but attractive world. Alicia learned to keep her belongings and workspace in order. Chaos could reign around her small writing desk, empty bottles, rags, and trash scattered everywhere, but the desk itself was always immaculate. The girl started asking her parents for new things. They could be inexpensive, but from a store, not handed down from someone else. Sometimes she even managed to persuade her parents to make a purchase. Furthermore, Alicia tried her best to be good at study. However, there was a problem. The girl diligently memorized all the rules from her textbooks and memorized formulas, but she still made mistakes in words and exercises. Physics and chemistry remained Greek to her. Alicia would get upset, but she never gave up. She kept studying, learning, and delving deeper into the subjects. Teachers noticed her efforts and praised her for her diligence. They even gave her higher grades as encouragement. Yet Alicia, being very mature for her age, knew that she wouldn't become a scientist. She dreamed of becoming an economist or a lawyer, working in an office, wearing a beautiful blouse, a formal skirt, and, of course, high-heeled shoes. But she realistically assessed her situation. She knew that getting into a university was unlikely, but obtaining a diploma from a vocational college was definitely feasible. Her teachers helped the conscientious student and provided her with a good certificate. Thanks to that, Alicia got accepted into a college to study as a confectioner. The profession seemed suitable to her, in demand and useful. "You'll never go hungry," her mother approved of her choice. By that time, her father was no longer around. He had died a year earlier, poisoned by low-quality alcohol. Her mother, by the way, didn't live much longer after her husband. One night, while intoxicated, she fell asleep outside in the cold and never woke up. She froze to death. That night, Alicia was preparing for her exams, as the winter session was in full swing, and she had no idea what had happened. She assumed her mother would spend the night wherever she had been drinking. But instead, she decided to go home. Thus, very young Alicia was left alone in the world. She had just turned 18. Luckily, she had reached the age of majority, otherwise, she might have had to go to an orphanage. Alicia mourned the loss of her parents deeply. No matter what they were like, they loved her and cared for her in their own way. They never beat or humiliated her. Even though they were sometimes too indifferent, they had had a difficult childhood themselves. Nobody had taught them how to raise children properly. But life itself didn't let the girl grieve for long. Now she had to think about how to support herself. No, Alicia had already been doing odd jobs for a while. Sometimes she cleaned floors instead of her mother or her replacement, and other times she replaced a saleswoman at a local shop for a few hours. But now Alicia needed much more money, as she had to pay for rent, take the bus to college every day, and feed herself somehow. So, she got a job as an assistant in the school cafeteria. The work turned out to be physically and emotionally exhausting. She had to move heavy pots from one place to another all day long. After her shift, Alicia felt completely drained. and there was no time left for her studies. Of course, she couldn't juggle work in college. Soon she was expelled. Alicia cried then out of despair, injustice, and the feeling of being unable to change anything. After all, she had tried so hard to make something of herself, and yet her fate repeated that of her parents. She ended up without an education too. But Alicia was determined not to follow their path of drinking. She was convinced that she would create her own family one day, with a caring, hard-working husband who would take care of her. Maybe she would even get a chance to continue her education later on. Who knows how life will unfold? Alicia dreamed of having a family. She was tired of living alone. She wanted a reliable person to be by her side, someone she could rely on. However, the local guys were certainly not suitable for the role of a life partner. They firmly and confidently followed in their parents' footsteps. It was very noticeable. Looking at the boys and girls she grew up with, Alicia was amazed. Didn't they understand that they needed to break away from such a fate, at least try to change something? But it seemed they didn't see anything special in their way of life. Everything was fine for them. They got together, had children, separated, and had fun parties with brawls and long, pointless conversations, just like their parents had once done. They invited Alicia to join, but she always refused, earning a reputation as a snob. "Your character has completely changed, Alicia. You look down on everyone, stopped hanging out with us at all," complained Sylvia, a neighbor girl and once Alicia's closest friend. Sylvia didn't work. Why should she? She already had a little son, and she received quite decent child support. If only she could get alimony from the child's father, but he wasn't working either. Sylvia often invited Alicia to visit her, but she always declined. She knew exactly what was happening behind the doors of Sylvia's apartment. The same things that once happened in her own home, wild parties with meaningless conversations and brawls. Sometimes Alicia wondered why she turned out to be different, kinda unique. Maybe it would have been much easier for her if she were like everyone else. But no. Alicia aspired to something else. She understood perfectly well that she needed to move somewhere else first, otherwise, she wouldn't be able to escape from this swamp. But she was catastrophically short on money. And then Alicia met Arnaud, quite by chance. The girl was returning from another exhausting shift, barely moving her legs. She sat down to rest on a bench and bought an ice cream. She had spent the whole day in the cafeteria, and it was so hot there. She wanted to cool down a bit. It was the middle of May, and the weather already felt like summer. The park was quiet, peaceful, and beautiful. Neatly dressed people strolled along the paths. Pleasant music played from the speakers on a lamppost. Alicia didn't want to go back home, to her rundown shack. There, behind the walls, would be more parties, surrounded by poverty and hopelessness. These people who walked here in the park probably didn't even suspect the existence of that other world. They seemed to believe that everywhere was just as beautiful and happy. Why so sad? A young man sat next to Alicia on the bench. He had a pleasant look and open smile, kind dark eyes, charming dimples on his cheeks, and slightly tousled chestnut hair. Just walking through the park, not bothering anyone, and then I come across such a wondrous sight, a beautiful girl sitting alone on a bench. Very beautiful and very sad. It's not right. Alicia smiled. A cute guy called her beautiful. That's cool. It was nothing like the sleazy compliments she received from her neighbors. But how could she be considered beautiful? She was just an ordinary girl, nothing special. Arnaud, the stranger, introduced himself. "And may I know your name?" "Don't take it as impudence or pushiness. I just want to be able to address you somehow." "You don't mind, do you?" Alicia, the girl, smiled slightly, feeling a bit shy. She was intrigued by what would happen next. This Arnaud didn't push her away or make her uncomfortable. On the contrary, he seemed very friendly. His smile was genuine, kind, and sincere. They ended up sitting on that bench for a long time. They chatted about everything under the sun, sharing stories about themselves, gradually growing closer and becoming almost like family. Arnaud, too, had lost his parents. He was raised by his aunt, his mother's sister. He never knew his father, and his mother passed away when he was just 5 years old. The young woman had a weak heart. That's how little Arnaud ended up in his aunt's family. She wasn't exactly thrilled to have an extra mouth to feed. She didn't kick him out of the house, but she couldn't provide him with love and care either. Arnaud accepted this fact with understanding and was grateful to his aunt for not sending him to an orphanage. At least some family is better than growing up among strangers, probably, the young man mused. At least that's what I think. Alicia nodded. Maybe Arnaud was right, but still, his aunt seemed too indifferent and distant. Alicia's own parents certainly loved her. In their own way, they cared for her. Arnaud, it seemed, never experienced parental affection and love. After finishing the 9th grade, he enrolled in a technical school to study welding. However, he didn't finish his education as he needed to work. His aunt had no intention of supporting an 18-year-old mouth to feed. I raised you until you reached adulthood, fulfilled my duty, declared this stern woman on her nephew's birthday. Now, please, start your own life. It's time for you to move out. And so the young man had to hastily finish his driving courses and get a job at the motor depot of a factory. Alicia was amazed when she heard this. It was so similar to her own story. She, too, couldn't finish her education, which is why she had to support herself. She was just a step away from graduating, but she had to rush into finding work. Well, I'm even grateful to my aunt for doing that, smiled Arnaud. Now I'm only 20, and I'm already fully independent. My peers are still living off their parents, but I'm my own boss. Arnaud rented an apartment in a nice neighborhood and managed to find an excellent job. He chauffeured the head of a large plant. His salary was quite good. He had enough for living expenses and even for entertainment. Since that memorable evening, Arnaud and Alicia were inseparable. They started dating, going on various outings together. The young man always came up with something new. They strolled through the old city center, admiring its unique buildings. They even visited a cat cafe, an establishment that Alicia had never even heard of. And many other adventures. After just a month, Arnaud suggested that Alicia move in with him. She gladly agreed. Why not? It was even more advantageous to rent one apartment instead of two. Besides, Alicia had long dreamt of leaving her shabby shack. Arnaud turned out to be kind, caring, and attentive. He was the kind of person Alicia had always dreamed of having by her side. He could do everything: cook, do repairs, and manage money. He was skillful, responsible, and practical. Most importantly, he loved Alicia deeply, and she could feel it. Of course, she loved him too, and the young couple felt genuinely happy together. They believed they could achieve success together. It was not by chance that fate brought two people with such similar stories and views on life together. Arnaud worked as a driver, and Alicia continued working in the school cafeteria. Now she returned home with pleasure. On her way, she bought something delicious to cook a favorite dinner for Arnaud and waited for him to come back from work. They got married a month after they started living together. Everything developed so quickly for them. They didn't throw a big wedding. What was the point? They didn't have extra money. They didn't have relatives to witness the solemn event either. They thought it was better to use the money to buy something for the house. They enjoyed a cozy time together in a restaurant. At that moment, Arnaud looked into Alicia's eyes with a serious expression and said he would do anything for their family. We will be happy. We'll have children, and they will be happy too. I would move mountains for us. Arnaud really made an effort to fulfill that promise. He worked hard, received bonuses, which he saved for their future home. The couple had a shared dream, to have their own apartment, and they were working towards it. They both knew that achieving this desire was still far off, but they believed that slowly but surely they would get there. Regarding having children, Arnaud and Alicia decided not to rush. They believed that they needed to earn enough to have their own place first. They wanted their child to have a happy and carefree childhood, unlike their own. However, it seemed that fate had its own plans. One day, Alicia realized that she was expecting a child. It happened one morning, almost like an enlightenment. It was still too early to suspect anything, but Alicia suddenly felt the thought piercing through her: a little one was already living and growing inside her. At first, Alicia brushed off these suspicions, but eventually decided to take a pregnancy test. 2 lines. There was no doubt. Well, becoming a future mother almost didn't surprise her. She had sensed it all along. At that moment, Alicia couldn't have guessed or imagined that at the very same time, an entirely unknown woman would be rejoicing over a positive test result, a woman who would soon play a significant role in their young family's life. Arnaud was thrilled. When he found out the news, he lifted his young wife off the ground, spinning her around the room from the overflow of emotions. He hugged her so tightly that she found it hard to breathe. "I was worried about telling you. I thought you might get upset," Alicia smiled, looking at her radiant husband. "Why would I be upset?" he wondered. "Well, we wanted our own apartment first, get on our feet, and then." "We wanted," Arnaud agreed. "We planned everything completely differently, but somehow I'm incredibly happy. This is the best news of my entire life." Alicia smiled. How wonderful Arnaud was. She was only now starting to get used to the fact that such a person was now by her side, the best, kindest person on the planet, and he loved her. What a happiness it was. The young couple started preparing for the arrival of their heir. Alicia was transferred to a lighter job, as she couldn't carry heavy pots anymore. Her salary decreased, but Arnaud took on extra work. During the day, he chauffeured his boss, and in the evenings, he delivered materials to construction sites in his truck. He did everything he could to save up as much money as possible for the birth of their baby. "Our child must have everything necessary and even more," Arnaud would say, hugging Alicia after work in the evenings. Lina felt sorry for her husband. She saw how exhausted he was. But what could they do? Arnaud was right. They had no one to help them, so they had to achieve everything on their own, which wasn't easy. Then, the long-awaited maternity leave came. Alicia didn't feel very well, and she was glad to have the opportunity to rest a bit before the arrival of her beloved daughter. The ultrasound had already shown that it would be a girl. The couple even decided on a name. Arnaud said he wanted to name their daughter Sophia. Alicia had no objections. She also liked the name. It sounded warm and endearing. It happened on a late September evening. There were no signs of trouble. Arnaud went to do some extra work transporting furniture from one city to another. He was happy to have the chance to bring in some extra money, which was never truly extra. The weather was fine, the road calm, and Arnaud was an experienced driver. Although Alicia often worried when her husband made long-distance trips, that evening she felt no anxiety at all. Alicia lay on the couch with her laptop, browsing through clothes for their baby girl to wear when she leaves the hospital. Yes, there were still a couple of months to go, but considering ordering, delivery time, and so on, it was wise to prepare in advance. Alicia smiled as she looked at the tiny jumpsuits and bodysuits. Of course, the dresses were especially delightful. It turned out that even newborns had luxurious evening outfits. It was so pleasant to imagine their little girl wearing those clothes. She wondered who their little Sophia would resemble. Both she and Arnaud were attractive. Surely, their Sophia would be a beauty, but that wasn't the most important thing. Alicia just hoped for a healthy baby. Then the phone rang. Alicia immediately felt something was wrong. She didn't want to pick up the call. It was in the evening, from an unfamiliar number. It couldn't be good news, but she had no choice. "Alicia." A worried voice on the other end belonged to Samuel. She recognized him immediately. He was Arnaud's colleague and partner. The tone of his voice filled her with dread. "Alicia, it's a disaster. Arnaud had an accident." "How?" Alicia gasped. She felt something snap in her stomach. He lost control on the highway and crashed into the ditch. They took him to the regional hospital. Is he alive at least? I don't know anything. The accident was severe. I happened to pass by. I saw a familiar truck, and then all this happened right before my eyes. Go to the regional hospital or call and find out. They took him there. I managed to ask the doctors. Alicia rushed out of the house, hastily changing clothes. Her blood pounded in her temples, her legs trembled, and her heart clenched with icy fear. Just let him be alive, just let him be alive, she whispered to herself unconsciously. Not thinking about safety, Alicia hitchhiked a ride. A young man was at the wheel, watching her, alarmed, with half-crazed eyes. Is there any help you need? The young man asked sympathetically. Are you on your way to the maternity hospital? No, to the regional hospital, Alicia requested. Can you give me a ride there? Yes, of course. The young man didn't ask any unnecessary questions and didn't accept any money for the ride. It was evident that he sympathized with and cared for Alicia, but he didn't intrude into her personal space. He did ask a couple of times if she needed any help, but Alicia declined. What could this young man do to help her? He dropped her off at the hospital gate, wished her good luck, and drove away. Alicia hurried to the registration desk to finally find out where her husband was and how he was doing. She had to run between different buildings of the large regional hospital. Nobody seemed to know anything. She was bounced from one department to another like a football. Alicia felt completely overwhelmed until she finally found the necessary information. Montero? He's undergoing surgery right now, the girl at the registration desk replied, carefully checking the records in a thick notebook. He was admitted a few hours ago in critical condition. Alicia breathed a sigh of relief, in critical condition, but alive. That meant they managed to get him to the hospital in time. Now, it was all in the hands of the surgeons. What happened to him? What are his injuries? And who are you, by the way? The girl asked. His wife, Alicia replied and mentally scolded herself for not bringing her passport. But in her current state, she hadn't thought of it at all when leaving the house. Fortunately, the documents were not needed. The girl at the registration desk believed her on her word. Wait for the end of the surgery. The surgeon will contact you afterward, just leave your phone number. Can I wait here? What's the point? The surgery can last for several hours. It's already late, go home. You need rest in your condition. You won't be able to help here anyway. Nevertheless, Alicia stayed at the hospital until the end of the surgery. She sat on a bench by the doors of the surgical department and prayed for his life. She had never done it before. She hadn't even thought she knew how. But now, the words surfaced from somewhere deep in her mind. Arnaud had to survive, he simply had to. How could she go on without him? The girl from the registration desk approached her several times, bringing water and biscuits. At first, she seemed strict and indifferent. Then, she revealed her compassionate and attentive side, looking at Alicia with sympathy, offering encouraging words, and even giving her a couple of hugs. This support made Alicia feel a bit relieved. The surgery went on for a long time, and it was already morning when it ended. Alicia hadn't closed her eyes the entire time. How could she sleep when her heart was constricted with fear for her beloved? Finally, the tired surgeon came out into the corridor. Alicia, trembling with fear, carefully studied his face, trying to understand what news he was about to tell her. The injuries are serious. We had to fight for your husband's life. It was like pulling him back from the brink of death. Now, it all depends on his body whether he will make it or not. In any case, the next few days will be critical. If he survives, his recovery will be complex and lengthy. Alicia nodded her head. At that moment, she wasn't thinking about the upcoming difficulties. The most important thing was for Arnaud to survive. The surgeon explained the details of Arnaud's injuries. His condition was indeed very severe. Why did he drive so recklessly? The doctor sighed sadly. He was so strong and healthy. Now, at best, he'll become disabled. If he survives at all. Ah, young people, you don't think with your heads. Alicia sighed. There was no way to explain to this person in a few words that Arnaud was working hard for the sake of their child. He was taking extra shifts, doing any odd job he could find. That's what pushed him over the edge. Perhaps on that road, he lost focus due to exhaustion, which led to the accident. Alicia stepped out onto the hospital porch. It was already dawn. She called a taxi. Thankfully, she hadn't forgotten her phone at home, although she could have, given her state. Suddenly, her phone vibrated again. Who would call her so early? It was the person for whom Arnaud worked yesterday evening. I know what happened, he said. I understand that your husband is in the hospital now. They said he's alive, which is good. But you must understand me too, my truck is beyond repair. The furniture is also ruined. According to the contract, your husband is fully responsible for this. So, please compensate me for the damages. Not all at once, but... Yes, of course, Alicia murmured into the phone and hung up. Only now did she think about a different kind of problem: money. Arnaud was the main breadwinner in their family. He paid the rent for their apartment and bought groceries. Alicia's earnings barely covered their basic needs. Everything else relied on Arnaud's strong and reliable shoulders. And now what? A catastrophe. Where would they find money for food and housing? And likely, they would need money for medicines too. Arnaud needed treatment, rehabilitation. Where would they get the funds? The debt must be a fortune, a truck, furniture. But they had nothing to sell. And little Sophia would be born soon. Tears streamed from Alicia's eyes. Powerlessly, she slumped right on the steps of the hospital wing. And then... Sharp, excruciating pain shot through her abdomen, so intense that Alicia's vision blurred. It seemed to subside for a moment, but then returned with even greater force. Alicia clutched her belly with her hands and writhed in pain on the steps. The agony came in waves. She could no longer think about Arnaud or the financial problems that had befallen their family. Everything became insignificant as long as this infernal pain passed. Alicia called for help with her last bit of strength. Alicia was asked some questions, but her answers were often off topic. Then, someone placed a mask over her face and asked her to count from 10 to 1. Alicia concentrated and began counting. Soon, a blissful darkness enveloped her, bringing tranquility. Alicia felt like she was floating in something soft and gentle. The most important thing was that the excruciating pain was gone, no more thoughts, worries, or fears. Just silence and peace. When Alicia opened her eyes, she was disappointed to find herself in a bright hospital room. Her mouth was terribly dry, and her tongue felt glued to the roof of her mouth, causing discomfort. Alicia was lying under a drip, and some wires were attached to her chest. She felt an odd lightness throughout her body. She instinctively reached for her belly but found nothing there. How was this even possible? Alicia's forehead was covered in cold sweat from fear and anxiety. "Hey, someone!" Alicia shouted with all her might, but her voice came out weak, barely audible. Fortunately, someone noticed the patient. A woman in a white coat, either a doctor or a nurse, entered the room. "Where is my baby?" Alicia asked a question upon which her entire life depended. She had never been so terrified before. "Your baby girl is in the premature babies ward." "She's alive," the hospital staff member hurried to reassure the patient. "You had premature labor due to stress. It's a good thing you were in the hospital at the time. We were able to provide quick assistance." "Is she alive?" Alicia clarified again. "Yes, she's alive. A good girl, quite robust, but she needs to grow in an incubator. After all, she's premature. I've seen many such children." She will be fine, of course, rehabilitation will be necessary, but she's not critical. Don't worry. Alicia nodded gratefully. The main thing was that Sophia was alive. The young mother immediately believed the woman in the white coat. Everything would be fine with her daughter. Ironically, on the same day, the woman who would later save Alicia and Arnaud also gave birth, but her baby was also premature. Unlike Alicia, she received entirely different forecasts from the doctors. They didn't give her baby any chance at survival. "Can I see my daughter?" the woman asked. "Not now, later. You are still too weak, you've lost a lot of blood and everything. We all know what happened to your husband. It's no wonder you got so stressed and gave birth prematurely. What about my husband? Do you have any news about him? I know he's alive. He's in the intensive care unit now. That's all I know." Both women faced the challenges of motherhood with their premature babies, uncertain of what the future held for them and their families. Days were filled with anxiety and fear for her daughter and husband, injections, pills, and painful procedures. Alicia felt her strength returning, which was a good thing because she would need it. Now she would have to take care of her disabled husband and her premature newborn daughter, who required extra care due to her premature birth. The financial problems were still there, and Alicia wondered if she could handle everything on her own. The medical staff, aware of the young mother's situation, tried to support her in any way they could. Every day they updated her on Arnaud's condition. He had been moved out of the intensive care unit, started moving his arms, speaking, and even learned to sit up. However, his prospects of walking again seemed much worse. Everything pointed to Arnaud never being able to get out of his wheelchair. Meanwhile, little Sophia was doing well. She was growing stronger and gaining weight, which was the most important thing. Alicia was allowed to visit her on the third day after her birth. Sophia lay in her incubator, so tiny and vulnerable. Her body was entwined with wires, but even among the other premature babies, she looked the sturdiest. There were other infants who were born much earlier than the expected term, while Sophia spent 7 months in her mother's womb. Soon, Alicia was discharged from the hospital, but she continued to visit the hospital every day to see Sophia and Arnaud and to get updates from the doctors. Arnaud was trying to stay positive, but it was such a painful sight of her once strong husband in a wheelchair. He reassured Alicia that he would recover soon and get back to work because he couldn't stand being idle. He dreamed of holding his daughter, carrying her on his shoulders in the park, and learning to braid her hair. Alicia smiled sadly, knowing that the chances of Arnaud walking again were slim. Although there was a chance, the rehabilitation required significant funds, and she had no idea where to get them. The doctors helped with obtaining disability benefits, providing some free medical services, but it was far from enough for Arnaud's full recovery. On top of that, the truck's owner kept calling every day, demanding money. Alicia even had to go back to work. She took on the job of cleaning the stairwells in the mornings and evenings to earn some money. At least she had time for it since Sophia was still in the hospital. Another month passed, and finally, Arnaud was discharged from the hospital. He returned home in a wheelchair. Fortunately, there were ramps in their building, but it was still challenging. Adjusting to his new reality was not easy, but Arnaud remained resilient. He supported Alicia, searched for work, and explored the internet for any potential income opportunities. Unfortunately, the job market for people with mobility issues was extremely limited. Despite the hardships, Alicia and Arnaud did their best to remain hopeful and determined. Their love for each other and their daughter gave them the strength to face the uncertain future together. Finally, they discharged little Sophia. The joy of the young parents knew no bounds, despite the seemingly hopeless situation. Arnaud quickly learned all the baby handling skills, bathing, feeding, and changing diapers. Seeing that the young father was doing quite well, Alicia decided to go back to work. "We don't have enough money. You can handle the baby at home. I'll go back to the canteen. There's no other way." Arnaud was forced to agree. Alicia could see how hard it was for him. After all, he had been the main breadwinner for so long, and now he had to rely on his wife. But there really was no other option for the young family. They needed to pay for their housing, food, and repay debts. The money that Arnaud had saved for their future home over the past couple of years disappeared at an alarming rate. Part of it went to medicine, and part to pay off the truck's cost. It was a difficult time. Alicia worked around the clock, in 2 shifts. Arnaud did his best to manage things at home. It was not easy for him either. Sophia was fragile and suffered the consequences of being born prematurely. She needed medication, expensive vitamins, consultations, and checkups with specialists. Alicia was exhausted, and Arnaud looked like a squeezed lemon. He took odd jobs, earning pennies, but he couldn't just sit idle. Sophia relied entirely on him. However, the head of the family felt it was not enough. And still, they catastrophically lacked money. They couldn't even afford a stroller for Sophia, which they needed to take her to the polyclinic. One evening, Alicia was returning home from work. It was already getting dark. Her back and legs were aching from fatigue, and her mind was filled with heavy thoughts. This was not the family life Alicia had imagined. In her dreams, she saw herself strolling through the park with a pram carrying a well-dressed baby. Alicia often watched young moms passing by, peaceful, content, happy, and they had no idea how lucky they were. Lucky to be able to freely walk with their little ones and dedicate all their time to them. But there's Sophia, she didn't even have a stroller. Suddenly, Alicia's attention was drawn to a woman walking towards her with a stroller. It was a wonderful stroller in a fashionable coffee shade, convenient, maneuverable, clearly very expensive and of high quality. Alicia had seen such strollers in baby stores. They cost a fortune. Alicia instinctively glanced at the woman. There was something intriguing about her. So stylish, well-groomed. She was older, but nowadays, many give birth to their first child at 40. It's trendy, especially among the wealthy. But why did this woman look so sad? Perhaps something happened in her life? Surely something terrible had happened to her. Otherwise, it was impossible to explain that look in her eyes. After all, everything seemed fine for her. She was walking so beautifully, pushing the expensive stroller in front of her. There must be a well-dressed baby inside it. The woman rolled the stroller to the garbage bins. The garbage hadn't been collected for a long time, and here, a kind of makeshift dump had formed. Alicia thought that maybe the woman would now throw away a bag of garbage and continue on her way. But the stranger acted differently. She sighed, rocked the stroller a few times, and left. She walked briskly behind the houses, heading somewhere far away. And the stroller was left behind. Alicia, not believing her eyes, hurried to the garbage bins. First, she looked inside the stroller. There was no one there. Alicia breathed a sigh of relief. She had already thought that some lunatic had thrown a baby in the trash. Such cases are sometimes described on the internet. But the stroller, fortunately, was empty. So why did the stranger leave it here? Probably discarded it. People sometimes leave good things near trash bins for those in need to take. That must be the case with this woman. Her child must have grown up, and she got rid of the unnecessary stroller. Yes, that was the most reasonable explanation. But Alicia tried not to rejoice just yet. What if the woman returns now? What if she just left the stroller here temporarily while running errands or getting her child? It was a strange choice of place, of course, but who knows? Half an hour passed, and the woman didn't appear. All this time, Alicia kept an eye on the stroller because what if someone else takes it? Such a valuable item wouldn't stay near the garbage bins for long. They needed the stroller for Sophia. It was simply indispensable. In the end, Alicia convinced herself that the owner of the stroller didn't need it, and with a calm heart, she rolled it to her home. Arnaud, seeing the upgrade, even whistled in surprise. Look at the transport our Sophia got. Elite means of transportation. I'm amazed myself, Alicia smiled. The woman left it right in front of my eyes and walked away. I waited for a while, hoping she'd come back. But no, she didn't return. It's strange. Such a beautiful, obviously expensive stroller. She could have sold it and made a lot of money. The stroller is in excellent condition, like new. It's strange indeed, Alicia agreed. It looks like they used it very carefully. Or maybe they didn't use it at all, Arnaud shook his head, carefully examining the tires. Well, never mind, we'll never understand the rich. Arnaud volunteered to wash the stroller himself, and that's how he discovered the letter. A folded sheet of paper was lying in the side pocket of the stroller. It was a whole message. Come here, Arnaud called his wife. At that moment, she was playing with Sophia. This is just... I can't believe it. Read this, the guy handed the sheet to his wife. Where did you find this? It was in the stroller. I don't even know how to react to this. It's an incredible letter. I apologize for the oversight. Here is the translation following your request. Alicia took the paper from her husband's hands and began to read. Beautiful, almost calligraphic handwriting, a light style. Clearly, it was written by a very educated person. And the meaning itself. Yes, Arnaud was right. It was an incredibly unbelievable story. Hello, people who found this letter, the message began. If you're reading this, it means the stroller has finally found its little owner, and that's just wonderful. My name is Catalina. I decided to leave the stroller precisely near the garbage bins so that it could go to those in need, to people with a little one, who have no money for a baby carriage. May this stroller serve you well and help you raise your child. Undoubtedly, you are people with low income, perhaps even living on the verge of poverty. Various situations happen. Why am I so sure of this? It's simply because hardly anyone from an affluent family would pick up a stroller from a landfill. Such people prepare for the arrival of a child in advance. They make lists, choose things in baby stores. I was just as fortunate recently. But you are happy, even happier than me. Because you have the most important thing, your child, your little son or daughter. It's the happiness of being parents, seeing your little one grow, giving them love, introducing them to this world. I don't even know what could be better than that. Probably nothing. So you are much happier than me. It's challenging for you now, but I am sure you will cope. Everything will eventually be fine for you. May this stroller become a helping hand for you at the start of your success. She seems to describe us, Alicia said, looking at Arnaud in amazement. Exactly, her spouse agreed. That's what's so astonishing. Including, well, come on, read further. There's a lot of interesting stuff, especially at the end. Alicia once again immersed herself in reading. My life was like a continuous fairy tale, where all my wishes came true. Since childhood, I never knew refusal in anything. My father is a successful businessman, and my mother is a thriving financier. From both sides of the family, I was the only granddaughter. Can you imagine how they spoiled me, how much love, attention, and care I received? They invested so much in me. And I knew that the time would come, and I would pass all of this on to my children. From a young age, I dreamed of a large family, and in games with my friends, I always took on the role of a mother with many children. From childhood, I heard from everyone that I would become a wonderful mother when the time came. So I grew up with this thought in my mind. And then I grew up. It turned out that life was vivid, diverse, and interesting. We traveled a lot with my parents, but trips with friends were something entirely different. In general, I had a happy student life. I even had a chance to live abroad and visit various corners of the planet. I ended up in all sorts of adventures. As they say, there will be plenty to remember in old age. It was a very joyful period of my life, vibrant and eventful. And then I got interested in stock market trading. It just happened that I became a successful broker, although I never aspired to it. I thought I'd get married, have children, as I once dreamed, and focus on family life. But it turned out differently. Work completely consumed me. the thrill, success, and recognition from authoritative financiers. I was invited to conduct seminars in prominent business centers, and business sharks listened to my words. It all made my head spin. I didn't notice how my priorities changed. Of course, sometimes I thought it was time to get married and become a mother. Time was passing by. But, on the one hand, I was still young, and on the other hand, there was no one around whom I saw as my spouse. Perhaps these were just excuses because I was content with the life I was leading. Watching friends who were immersed in children's affairs and problems, I cherished my freedom. The once lively, energetic girls turned into something else. All they talked about was their kids and their accomplishments. It made me feel melancholic. I felt like a queen, successful, respected, and indispensable. Notable economists sought my advice, and magazines wrote about me. Indescribable feelings. This glitter and glamour overshadowed my most profound desire. I had always dreamt of children, wanted to take care of little ones, teach them something, love them. But during that period, for some reason, I decided that motherhood was for the lazy, limited housewives. I even judged women entirely devoted to their children, considering them capable of nothing else but giving birth. I almost stopped socializing with married friends. Their children irritated me. I don't even understand how it happened. Are you child-free now? One of my acquaintances asked me once. She had recently given birth to a son and couldn't think about anything else. I pondered. No, not child-free. It's just that during that period, I didn't want to burden myself with all of that. After all, it felt amazing not to depend on anyone, to be free and carefree. If I wanted to, I flew to the seaside with friends. If I wanted to, I went to clubs or shopping. If I wanted a new romance, I dove headlong into beautiful relationships. I thought I would have time later, in the future, to become a mother someday, many, many years from now. For now, my life was already vibrant and exhilarating enough. And then, somehow, I got tired of it all. The work, the risks, the superficial romances, the clubs, the drinking, the dancing, even the travels. I longed for the warmth of a family, a reliable person by my side. It seemed that the time had come. However, by then, I was already 35 years old. I remembered my long-standing dream of becoming a mother of many children. Now, I looked at my married friends not with contempt or pity, but with a hint of envy. I, too, wanted all of that, a husband, children, a family. It was at that moment that I realized that work and recognition could never replace the warmth of loved ones. These thoughts brought tears to my eyes. Perhaps I had grown up. And right at that moment, I met Victor. It was a chance encounter at a cafe where we both had breakfast before work. Between us, as they say, a spark ignited. We exchanged glances at first, then he approached me. "Señorita, I've been looking at you, and I can't take my eyes off you. You are incredibly beautiful, and your eyes. They are so amazing. I can see from them that you are a very kind and compassionate person." It was delightful to receive such a refined compliment, especially from a man who appealed to me from the first glance. But I hastened to disillusion him. For some reason, I didn't want to hide anything from this man. "You don't quite understand people. You don't know me at all and assume that I'm kind and good. It's not true. Seems like you still don't know yourself well," Victor smiled. "But I am good at reading people, and I never make mistakes. You will understand that later." We started talking, and Victor immediately caught my interest. He was so intelligent, insightful, and most importantly, he looked at me with admiration and tenderness. That's how our relationship began. Half a year later, we were already celebrating a lavish wedding. He turned out to be the owner of a small dairy plant. What captivated me the most was his sense of humor and caring nature. Finally, I felt like a woman in the full sense of the word with him. It turns out it's very nice when someone cares for you, protects you. Of course, we didn't delay the question of having children since both of us were at an age when it was high time to become parents. He dreamed of having a big family, just like I did once. By Victor's side, my childhood dream came back to life. I realized that above all else, I wanted to be a mother, and as soon as possible. It was at this point that things turned out to be not so simple. The coveted pregnancy was not coming. For the first time in my life, I couldn't get what I wanted so badly. It was disheartening. Victor tried to reassure me, telling stories about his acquaintances who also didn't become parents right away. But it didn't ease my mind. I would lash out at my husband, even though I loved him deeply. He patiently endured all my outbursts. To this day, I don't understand where he found so much strength. After some time, we decided to seek medical help. At first, the doctors struggled to diagnose the issue. Both Victor and I underwent extensive examinations. Money wasn't a problem, so we visited the most renowned doctors both in our country and abroad. Finally, after some time, the doctors found the cause. The problem was with my health, a subtle genetic issue that was nearly impossible to detect. However, they couldn't come up with a solution to fix the situation. If I had decided to become a mother earlier, it might have worked out. But the years had turned against me in my case. They warned me that chances were almost non-existent, and that's when I enthusiastically embraced the challenge. I was not one to give up or lose in anything. The words of the doctors were taken by me as a challenge. And so, again, it was treatment, examinations, endless tests, and procedures. I stopped working altogether. Nothing else brought me pleasure. I had a goal, and I systematically pursued it. How could it be that my dream might not come true? Such a thought just couldn't fit into my head. There was a period when I started feeling hatred towards women with small children and pregnant women, solely because I envied them so bad. Why did they succeed while I didn't? It seemed so unfair. What made them better than me? I would have been a much better mother, that's for sure. Victor was so patient with me. He reassured and supported me. My husband repeated many times that he only wanted one thing, for me to return to my previous self, cheerful, kind, and full of life. I miss my Catalina so much, he would say. I haven't talked to that smart, sensitive woman in a long time. Then go and find that woman, I would reply bitterly, since your wife no longer satisfies you. Why do you say that? Victor sighed and embraced me. I just miss our old life. I would have loved to help him, but how could I? I was fixated on something unattainable, going out of my mind completely. Let's adopt a child, Victor tried to persuade me. There are so many babies in orphanages who need parents. They were betrayed from birth, abandoned and left behind. But we have many opportunities. We will give this child or these children everything they need for happiness. Just think about it. Just think. He even showed me photographs of orphans from the orphanages. Big-eyed babies, touching and defenseless, and such need of loving and caring adults by their side. But I didn't want to hear anything. I wanted my own blood child. Why should I take care of someone else's children? If they are not needed by their own parents, why should they be needed by us? Just imagine whose offspring end up in orphanages, lazy people, drunkards, and the like. Don't talk nonsense. Everything will work out for us in the end. Nothing worked out. The doctors shook their heads, and more frequently, they spoke about how difficult it was to deal with genetic diagnoses. The treatment became more expensive and challenging, and the prospects grew increasingly uncertain. 5 years of struggling to have a child were extremely challenging for me. Hope and disappointment alternated with each other. At times, I lived in anxiety, and at other times, I felt intense pain from another failure. Victor. Where did he find so much patience? He was always there, supporting me, even when I acted irrational. Occasionally, my husband would bring up the idea of adoption, but I refused to listen. His persuasion seemed to spur me on. Now I wanted to prove him wrong. We would have our own child because I said so, while he was offering some nonsense. I tried everything imaginable, innovative methods, folk medicine, and even sought the help of healers. A shaman ran around me, uttering strange words and filling the room with suffocating smoke. But even then, I believed I was doing everything correctly. I knocked on every door and used every opportunity. I must have lost my sanity for a while. Victor looked at me with pity and concern. He was very worried about my well-being, as I was not behaving like myself. Finally, the miracle happened. One May morning, I found out that I was expecting a baby. My joy knew no bounds, and tears of emotion streamed down my face. I gazed at the positive test, and my legs trembled. Finally. In that moment, I wished I could fast forward life to experience the happiness of my long-awaited baby being born. Though there were still months ahead, I already felt like a mother. The doctors were astonished. According to them, there was no hope, but my case turned out to be a miracle. Naively, I believed it was because my desire was so strong that it changed the world and the order of things within it. I felt almost almighty. Victor was, of course, also overjoyed. I sensed a sense of superiority over him. Well, how could he be right when he had talked so much about adopting children, trying to reconcile me with our situation, and ended up being wrong? I rejoiced in this triumph as well. Now, it's embarrassing to write such things. Forgive me, readers, for describing everything in such detail. I guess I need to unburden myself. I want someone to learn about my destiny and understand my feelings. Please read until the end. There's something very important and interesting waiting for you there. I genuinely want to help you and your little one, not only materially but also with advice. My life. Make the right conclusions, avoid my mistakes, and appreciate what you have. Pregnancy was difficult from the very beginning. Constant threats of miscarriage. I spent months in hospitals, sometimes weeks without leaving the bed, protecting my little one. My health deteriorated sharply. They suggested terminating the pregnancy because the tests indicated that my body couldn't handle the strain. My life was in danger. Nevertheless, I had a serious condition that ideally should have prevented me from giving birth. I didn't want to listen to anyone. After dreaming about pregnancy for so long, waiting for this moment, how could I suddenly give up on the long-awaited baby? No way. You are doctors, and you are paid huge sums to do your job. I yelled at the medical staff. So, do your job properly. It's just a few more months left. It's the 21st century, for heaven's sake. Is medicine really so powerless nowadays? We are doctors, yes, you're right. Doctors, but not gods. If you suffer, the baby suffers too. The consequences can be catastrophic. There are no guarantees. You must understand this, they replied. But I didn't want to listen. By that time, I already knew I was carrying a son. He even appeared in my dreams many times. For the sake of this little one, I was ready to endure any pain and spend all 9 months in the hospital if needed. I needed a child, and I didn't even think about the fact that the baby suffered in a womb not adapted for pregnancy. That's how much of a terrible egotist I was. Victor, seeing that he couldn't change my mind, stood by my side and supported me. He stopped arguing to avoid stressing me unnecessarily. He agreed with everything, held my hand, calmed me down, bought all the necessary medications, talked to the doctors, and simply hugged me when I needed it. My condition worsened. I hoped that the baby suffered less, but the ultrasound showed that things were also very, very bad with him. I was so afraid for my little one. He was the meaning of my entire life. I talked to my son, asking him to hold on. To distract myself, I browsed websites with baby products, looked at strollers, and chose clothes for my little boy. It was such a pleasant distraction. Many packages arrived at our house, and there were so many of them. Looking at those things, I thought about the good things because there they were, the evidence that Victor and I were almost parents. The house was filled with so many baby items. We just had to wait for their little owner. He would undoubtedly be the happiest child in the world, and the difficulties would be forgotten like a bad dream. Our son was born much earlier than expected. The doctor's manipulations didn't help. My body decided to get rid of what was destroying my health and harming me. The baby turned out to be weak and fragile. I saw his delicate little arms and legs, some strange, bright color of the skin. My heart ached with pity and tenderness. Just looking at my son, wrapped in wires, I realized that I had been a complete egotist. The doctors had warned that it would be like this. And now, I felt much better. My health was rapidly improving. But the baby was not doing well. He was all alone in the intensive care unit, fighting for his life. The doctors immediately said that there was almost no hope. Congenital pathologies, the overall weakness of the baby due to the difficulties of my pregnancy. But I still believed in a miracle. I even threatened the doctors that they would be responsible if anything happened. Of course, it didn't help. My son fought for several days, but eventually he surrendered. When they told me, my world turned upside down. I was so angry at everyone, blaming the doctors, even Victor. In my opinion, he didn't believe strongly enough in a positive outcome, and therefore, he was also to blame. It got to the point where Victor admitted me to a clinic. A ward with soft walls, considerate staff, talks with a psychotherapist, silence, peace, medications. I started to recover gradually, reevaluated many things, and understood. I realized that I had been an egotist, obsessed with my desires. I understood how poorly I behaved towards Victor. I started thinking about the future. At that time, I didn't know what I would do, but I realized for sure that I needed to direct my energy not towards anger and hatred, but towards creation. It was then that the conversations with my husband resurfaced in my mind. Victor was right. There are so many disadvantaged children in the world. We should help them, support them if we don't have our own little one. It doesn't mean that there is no one to give our unused love and care. I returned home a different person. Victor was the happiest of all. He said how much he missed the old Catalina, and here she was again, by his side. It was very sweet. The things. Reminders of the tragedy that happened to us were the things I had bought in countless quantities: clothes, toys, furniture. Victor put them in a separate room, and it turned into a sort of storage or museum. Those things. Looking at them still hurt me a lot. Get rid of this, I told my husband. Why? He asked in surprise. Maybe it's better to give them to those in need? Victor, as always, was right. I started visiting orphanages with boxes and bags. There, I got acquainted with the staff and learned the stories of the children. Many, many stories, complex destinies, tragedies, betrayals. Someday, when I have more time, I will write a book about it. People need to know. It fascinated me. I wanted to help the disadvantaged little ones and make their lives a little better because I could. I had all the possibilities. And now, I am thinking about organizing my own charitable foundation. There are many challenges with that, but I'll manage. I've already started to learn about how to arrange everything. Meanwhile, I help the children from the orphanages by buying them the necessary things, organizing celebrations. It's such a joy to see the smiles on the faces of these boys and girls. Some time passed. I thought I had given away all the things I bought for my son, but one day I came across this stroller. I remembered how carefully I chose it, studied the specifications, looked at its appearance. I wanted my son to feel comfortable and good in it. But unfortunately, he never got to use it. The stroller was stored in the basement, so Victor got worried when I noticed it. He thought it would hurt me again. But strangely, I only felt a slight sadness and regret because I already had a purpose in life again. I knew that my child, what happened to him, it was not in vain. Now, in honor of my son, I will help many other children. Our little boy lived for a very short time, but his brief life will change this world significantly. But what about the stroller? I came up with a very interesting idea about it. Children in orphanages have a tough life. Everyone knows that. It's often talked about. But at least they are looked after, always fed, and dressed. They lack parental love and care. Yet, In material terms, they are provided for. However, there is another category of children. Their parents earn barely enough and can't even buy them the essentials. How many such families do we have? They usually receive no help. There's a mom and dad, so they should raise their offspring, that's what most people think. But situations can be different. Not only lazy and irresponsible people end up in difficult situations. I decided to leave this stroller where it will surely be found by people who desperately need it. Good things that are no longer needed are usually left near trash bins. That's what I did with the stroller. Thank you for reading this story to the end. I hope my letter eventually reached the right recipient. I believe it did. Surely you are now in despair, lacking money for a living, and unable to see a future. So, I want to help you with something else. Near the trash bins where you found the stroller, there is an unfinished building of a shop, an abandoned area. There, under the porch, I left something for you. I hope it will help you to rebuild your life and raise your baby to be a worthy person. Good luck to you in everything. Catalina. Alicia, in bewilderment, put the letter aside and looked at Arnaud. Do you think it's all true? Are you talking about what's waiting for us under the porch of the unfinished building? And about that too. And, in general, about this whole story. I don't know what to think, Arnaud shrugged. But I'll definitely check under the porch right now. I don't want to wait until morning. The young parents put baby Sophia to sleep, waited until she fell soundly asleep in her crib, and went outside. They weren't worried about their daughter, they knew she would sleep for at least 4 hours. And they didn't need that much time, the unfinished building was very close, they would handle it within 20 minutes. Here it is, Arnaud said, deftly wheeling the stroller up to the porch of the unfinished shop. He bent down and started feeling around under the porch. Alicia stood next to him, feeling a bit anxious. She looked around. Who knows, maybe it was some kind of prank or, even worse, someone wanted to set them up. What if someone was watching them from around the corner right now? Look! Arnaud exclaimed, pulling out a small package wrapped in cellophane. He immediately tore open the wrapping and whistled in surprise. Alicia looked at what he was handing her. It was a thick bundle of bills. A lot, a whole fortune. Alicia even pinched herself to make sure it wasn't a dream. There was a considerable amount of money here. Maybe they're fake? The girl doubted. No, it looks like they're real. Arnaud carefully examined the bills. So, everything in this letter is true, from the first word to the last. Unbelievable. Alicia still couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe that unknown people saved their family from an inevitable catastrophe. But that's how it turned out in the end. The money was enough for Arnaud's rehabilitation. The young man quickly got back on his feet at a private medical center. Now he could work again. They say the truth, if you want to make a person happy, take something away from them first, and then give it back, Arnaud rejoiced. Finally, he could walk again. Although, it took a long time to learn how to do it. Not everything worked out right away. Together with their daughter, they took their first steps, one from birth, the other after the accident. The young couple also had enough money to buy their own apartment. A small 2-room flat in a not-so-prestigious area of the city, but it was their own, cozy, dear, and beloved. With great pleasure, the young parents renovated and arranged their nest. Yes, the money found under the porch was enough for them to settle in their new place. Moreover, Arnaud was back to work, so the family was no longer struggling. Alicia could peacefully stay on maternity leave with Sophia. She no longer had to work from dawn to dusk in the canteen. What a joy it was to see her child grow, introduce her to the world, spend time with her without worrying about survival. Arnaud paid off his debt to his previous employer and found a new job. Now he no longer worked multiple shifts and was much more attentive and cautious than before. Life had improved. One day, Alicia was strolling in the park with the stroller, the same stroller of a wonderful coffee shade. Its design allowed it to transform into a sitting transport. Little Sophia was kicking her legs in the stroller, looking curiously at the world around her. In her light white dress and a fancy hat, she looked like a doll. Alicia suddenly realized that she was now that happy young mother, one of those she had once envied so much. And all of this was thanks to Catalina, the woman who had gone through a tragedy but managed to overcome herself and find her true calling. Perhaps now Catalina was helping other children, orphans, and babies from poor families. It's wonderful that there are such people in the world. Years passed. Arnaud and Alicia worked and raised Sophia. They were no longer destitute. They became an ordinary family with average income, and they could even afford to go to the seaside sometimes. And all of this was thanks to the accidental help from completely unknown people. Alicia tried to find Catalina, searching the internet, browsing through countless pages on social media. Why? Well, she just wanted to say thank you to the person who did so much for their family's future. At least a simple thank you. Let Catalina know that her stroller and money truly saved a whole family. It would probably be nice for her to hear that. But soon Alicia realized that Catalina, apparently, lived in a completely different city because no local shelters were being supervised, and there was no charity fund for children in their town either. She's like a fairy, Arnaud shrugged. He also wanted to find their savior. Appeared out of nowhere in a difficult moment and then vanished without a trace. Pure mystique. Our guardian angel, no doubt. Years went by. Sophia grew up and turned into a very pretty girl. She always studied excellently. Her parents were proud of her and really hoped that, unlike them, she would definitely get a good education. Both of them encouraged Sophia to go to university. And the girl herself was not against it. Since third grade, she had dreamed of becoming a teacher. Of course, Sophia knew the story of the stroller. Her parents had told her about it when she was 5 years old. Alicia remembered the woman who left an expensive, new stroller near the dumpster every day. Her face was deeply engraved in Alicia's memory. And Catalina, the amazing fairy who helped their family escape poverty, was the one Alicia read about in the article. Doubts remained, so Alicia started searching for information about this random savior. She wanted to know for sure. There were plenty of articles about this woman on the internet. Her foundation was doing significant work, providing immense support to thousands of children over the years. Catalina didn't just help the children, she also engaged influential people in this cause. Famous actors, businessmen, all participated. In her interviews, Catalina emphasized that she couldn't do it alone. The world is not without good people, she said with a smile to the journalist. There are many more good people than indifferent and callous ones. Now I know that for sure. Catalina looked happy, full of energy, satisfied with life. Her eyes shone with a special light that had nothing in common with the extinguished eyes of the woman Alicia remembered. It made sense. If, of course, she was the same person who had gone through the tragedy. But now, the woman had found herself and was involved in an important and very responsible cause. To write or not to write? Alicia said aloud. She regretted that Arnaud was away on a business trip. She would have liked to consult with him. Alicia was used to discussing all important matters with her husband. The woman decided to find out more about Catalina to see if it was worth bothering such a busy person. Catalina had a rich and colorful life. She traveled a lot, both within the country and abroad, and almost always accompanied by foster children, now teenagers, so different and unique. If they had remained in the orphanage, who knows how their destiny would have unfolded. And then Alicia came across an article that dispelled all her doubts because this interview was about her too, about Alicia. It was a lengthy feature with many photographs. Catalina answered the questions in detail, not ignoring any details. How did it all start? The journalist asked. How did you decide that your calling was to help underprivileged children? As I mentioned before, it all started after we lost our son, our long-awaited, cherished child with Victor. We were preparing for his arrival. We had so many things left. I thought, these toys, blankets, someone must need them, right? Our son may be gone, but this good shouldn't go to waste. We delivered packages and boxes to orphanages. It's so logical to give children things that you don't need to orphanages. They'll always come in handy there. Alicia thought about the woman who left an expensive, new stroller near the dumpster every day. Her face was deeply engraved in Alicia's memory. And Catalina, the one she read about in the article, was the amazing fairy who helped their family escape poverty. Doubts remained, so Alicia started searching for information about this random savior. She wanted to know for sure. And then, when I thought I had gotten rid of all the things, that very stroller caught my eye. The stroller I carefully chose for my child. It hurt, I won't deny it, but by that time, I had learned to cope with my emotions. And I decided that I should help some needy family, people who had a baby but didn't have money for new things for the little one. Find a special family. Any family wouldn't do for me. I even traveled to neighboring towns, looking, observing. I felt like I was going crazy, but I still continued this strange pursuit. Perhaps the tragedy clouded my mind back then. In any case, I have no regrets about anything. And one day, I saw a sad girl. There was so much worry in her eyes. Visually, it was evident that the girl's fragile shoulders were burdened with the heavy weight of problems. She was walking through the park next to a guy in a wheelchair. Probably her husband. The girl was holding a tiny baby in her arms, hugging the little one, and she looked so beautiful. But she didn't realize it herself. Her eyes' desperation was splashing in them. The young man in the wheelchair was brave, even smiling, but I could see he was also on the edge. I followed this family. They captivated me deeply. I walked a little behind them and listened to their conversation. The guy needed expensive treatment. As I understood, something happened to him not long ago, and he ended up in a wheelchair, losing his income. The girl worked tirelessly in hard labor. Her husband took care of the baby as much as he could. But the most important thing, they talked about the stroller. The stroller? The journalist asked. Yes, the stroller. It became a kind of sign for me. They dreamed of a stroller for their baby. It would be easier for the man to take the baby to the clinic. And then something clicked in my mind. I realized they are the family I simply must help. But a stroller alone was not enough. These good people wouldn't be able to get out of poverty on their own. They needed help to get started, and I could provide it. Not only could I, but I also really wanted to, because how else? I'm sure they handled the money properly. Money? The journalist didn't understand. Yes. I decided to give them not only a stroller, but also a sum of money that would be enough for the guy's treatment and maybe even a small apartment. But how to do it without arousing suspicion? I thought about it for a long time, and then the plan just came together in my head. Alicia pulled away from the screen and smiled. Well. Now she was hearing her story from another perspective. It was so interesting, captivating, and unusual. The woman took that very letter out of the photo album. Of course, Alicia and Arnaud kept the message. Catalina wrote it many years ago. She sincerely wanted to help the family that found themselves in dire straits. I wrote a whole message to the future owners of the stroller on both sides of the paper. In it, I told them about my life, the history of the stroller. It was like therapy for me. I felt as if I was talking, releasing my pain, and healing. At the end of the letter, I gave this young couple a hint about where to find the money. I hope everything worked out well for them. I really wanted to know the fate of this family, so I even deliberately came to that city later, but I never met them again in the park. Perhaps they moved somewhere, or we simply missed each other. We good, Alicia whispered directly to the monitor. Thanks to you, everything is truly wonderful. But why didn't you just give them the money? The journalist didn't understand. I can't remember now. I was in a strange state back then. Maybe I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable or scared. After all, my story is not an easy one, and the situation itself could have seemed suspicious. In any case, I wanted to remain a mysterious stranger to this family, like a good fairy. It turned out to be an almost legendary story. I'm sure it will be passed down from generation to generation in that family. Almost like a fairy tale. A fairy tale. Alicia smiled. That's right. For a long time, Sonia believed that a fairy really helped them. So, that meeting wasn't accidental? Did Catalina know in advance that the stroller and the money would go to them? Nevertheless, this story had enough happy coincidences. After all, Catalina came to their city in search of a suitable family and met them with Arnaud in the park. They must have attracted attention. A strange trio, a young, bewildered woman, a tiny baby, and a guy in a wheelchair. Catalina noticed them, followed them, overheard fragments of their conversation, and became convinced that she should help them. Alicia didn't ponder anymore. She was already writing a message to Catalina. It turned out to be long, almost like that memorable letter from the stroller. Alicia detailed her story to this woman, mentioning poverty and despair. The accident, the disability of the sole breadwinner, the birth of their premature daughter, enormous debts. Catalina had to know that her help truly saved an entire family. At the end, Alicia wrote about her life today and even attached photos of her family, including those from their vacation at the seaside. There are no words to express our gratitude, Alicia concluded her letter. The woman read the message once more and clicked the send button.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.